We are bringing you solutions for everyday problems. Welcome back to Winn Tucson this Friday, and I'm so glad that we have NFIB State Director Chad Heinrich with us, the National Federation of Independent Business here in Arizona. Chad, welcome to our show this Friday, and thanks for joining us.
Thank you for hosting, Kathleen. Appreciate being here.
So the Senate is going to vote on Miss Julie Su, the Biden administration's nominee to lead the Department of Labor. Has that taken place?
It has not. The next step in that process would be floor consideration. So on the Senate floor, there's clearly not a consensus on this nomination, or else they would have probably already considered the nomination. But then also we've had some absences in the Senate, so that may also be part of it. But I think I would stress that the votes from our senators, Senator Kelly and Sinema, could be key deciding votes on this nomination.
And how does NFIB feel about this nomination of Miss Su? You go ahead. You go right ahead.
Sure. So NFIB is asking lawmakers to oppose Ms. Su's nomination based on her record. Her record both in California as the labor secretary and in her current deputy secretary position in the federal Department of Labor. It basically, her record makes it clear that she is no friend of small business owners.
And if you don't mind sharing with my listeners, what are some of the decisions she's made that have adversely affected small business? Because I think it's fine to say that, but then if you have a good example, because I think it's important that people understand that when you put people in a leadership role and they've already exposed a voting record, when they've already said, I'm going to do this, how detrimental it can be. And I think you and I both agree that some of our small businesses are surviving, but they're not thriving. And something like this could be detrimental to the existence of their business.
Yeah, well, Kathleen, why I would urge the listeners to reach out to Senators Kelly and Sinema are for very concrete examples of mismanagement by this nominee. For example, when Ms. Su was the California Labor Secretary, we Arizonans really had a front row seat to her disastrous tenure there. And she was responsible for implementing something called AB5. And so any of your listeners that either do business with independent contractors or are working as an independent contractor in their profession should be scared of her as a nominee to run the federal labor department. When she was in California, she basically implemented this policy that left small business owners facing civil penalties of $5,000 to $25,000 per violation. Mm-hmm. And what AB5 it really gets at is it was intended as a definition for independent contractors that was meant to target really the large rideshare companies. But as most people understand, within the business of government, the large companies ended up getting themselves carved out of that law. So our small mom and pop shops have really been left in the crosshairs in California on that policy. And what it really means is it reduces the amount of flexibility that the small business owners have is operating as an independent contractor. It basically tries to sweep in those independent contractors and call them employees of the businesses that they're serving. So that is one lingering example of her history in California that is very concerning. Now,
go ahead.
Well, she takes that one step further. Okay, mm-hmm. So Ms. Su is now in a deputy secretary role within the federal Department of Labor, and she's used that authority to propose a rule to also redefine and restrict what an independent contractor could be under the federal law, under the Federal Labor Standards Act. So the rule that was proposed at the federal level would have wrapped in millions of small business owners as employees rather than independent contractors. And really, the big issue there is similar to California. Is it's not necessarily if you make the right choice. It's if you make the wrong choice, you have a significant risk of liability if you're misclassifying yourself or the contractors that are working for you. So, a really bad precedent she set in California. Now she's trying to implement it at the federal level, and something that all small business owners should be concerned about.
And any time that you have somebody who's in that role who looks for ways to penalize small businesses and management and really hurt the average everyday worker, you have a problem. And do we know right now where our senators sit? Our Arizona senators are they in favor of her? Do we know how have they expressed any opinion?
They have not. We do not know where Senator Kelly or Senator Sinema are on this particular nomination. I would say that, interestingly, Senator Sinema has a little bit of experience with the issue of being an independent contractor.
Correct.
Where I believe it was her mother that actually, for a short period of time in her life, served as an independent contractor in a type of a marketing and sales role with one of the national franchise groups. So certainly she can understand this issue that we have with both the California law and the federal rule. But I would also bring up one other aspect of her record, Ms. Sue's record, that is very concerning, is that she's effectively indifferent to the concern of small business owners at the federal level, because at the federal level, we have an advocate within the Small Business Administration. It's called the Office of Advocacy, and they're really the watchdog over the federal agencies and how they implement rules, because federal agencies do have requirements to show impact of a rule on small business. And while she's been deputy secretary, so just the short tenure that she's been in D.C., she has been found to be non-compliant with existing federal regulations that help bring information to the forefront for small businesses to consider. So,
is there a penalty for that, area. Chad, if someone is found non-compliant in following the regulations in their role, and she's deputy secretary right now of labor, is there any consequence for that? What happens when you're non-compliant?
So that's a good question. The issue of compliance in that is part of federal regulatory kind of administrative regulation. So it's something like this that it creates a record that we can follow, and we understand that these haven't been followed. But to get some type of a penalty for this would be pretty inordinate, I think would be the right term, because you're effectively, it's a watchdog of the agency, but it's within the federal bureaucracy itself. So at best, we can just use this as an example. I don't foresee any kind of a prosecution coming from that.
That's too bad.
What I would say is also, I mean, the record of this nominee is really flagrant. So I think a lot of folks remember during the pandemic there was significant fraud on the unemployment insurance program.
Correct.
which are fully funded by small business owner taxes paid by our small business owners. So in California, the department that Ms. Sue oversaw in California lost $30 billion due to fraudulent claims during the pandemic.
Under her leadership.
Under her leadership. So just one other significant area of mismanagement, and we look for competency, right? I mean, we just want basic competency.
Well, one man's competency is another man's president, but what can I say? Sorry, I know you guys are non-political, but you can't write this. You can't write this way. Here's someone who's lost billions and billions of dollars on the backs of small business, and yet they're considering to make her the head of the whole Department of Labor. Like, who doesn't look at that? I'm kind of glad that it's not rushing through, but why Why would that be the person we would choose, given the level of incompetence, and it's demonstrated over and over again? And
Yeah.
she was so bad in California that we promoted her to the federal level, and now in the federal level, she's violated regulations and the regulatory authority that is supervising her actions is saying you're not in compliance. So that's the person we want to make the head of the Department of Labor? It makes no sense to me, Chad.
Yeah, I think the easiest thing to do, I'm sure that several of your listeners are driving around right now listening to this,
Yes.
and they may be independent contractors, right?
Correct,
They
absolutely.
could be a cosmetologist that's renting a chair at a salon. They could be one guy in his truck in a toolbox. All of these folks are independent contractors, and it's really just as simple as picking up the phone or sending an email to Senators Kelly and Sinema saying, please vote no.
Yes.
Say no to this nominee.
Well, and Senator Sinema is running for re-election, so if anybody should be reached out to, Senator Kelly also, but Senator Sinema has a lot at stake right now. Please blow up her phone. We have to take a short break. I just want to say about NFIB, they've been around for 80 years. NFIB has been the voice of small business, advocating on behalf of America's small and independent business owners, not only in Washington, D.C., but here in Arizona. Chad Heinrich joins us today. He is the state director for Arizona. Stay with us. When we come back, we're going to talk about some of the other things that happened locally and anything else that NFIB wants us to know so we can support our small businesses to thrive in what they're doing. This is Winn Tucson on 1030 a.m. The Voice, trusted local news and talk. Stay with us.